Good afternoon. We are calling to order the Technology and Innovation Commission meeting. Leah, would you like me to go ahead and get started with the roll call? And after?
Sure.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started with our roll call for today's meeting. Chair Gwen Schaefer.
Here.
Vice Chair D.W. Farrell.
Here.
Commissioner Rob Karenke.
Here.
Commissioner Lisa Mae Brunson.
Here.
Commissioner Justin Hectus.
Here.
Commissioner Parisa Vincent.
Here.
Commissioner Andrea White-Hughes.
Here.
Great, thank you. Leah, we can go ahead if you want to do your statement or the executive's director's report.
I'm going to do my statement first. Okay. So before we go into the agenda for the meeting, I wanted to make an announcement for those who are attending and would like to provide public comment and/or need Spanish translation services. First, please bear with us since this commission has not traditionally received this level of public comment in a virtual session. Second, for those who have requested Spanish language translation in advance and have provided their contact information, we have set up interpretation services in a separate digital platform where Spanish language interpretation is being provided right now. For any callers on this platform who would like to listen to the entire meeting in Spanish, please call this number 213-306-3065 instead and enter this meeting ID 146-252-1761. Again, for any callers on this platform who would like to listen to the entire meeting in Spanish, please call this number 213-306-3065 instead and enter this meeting ID 146-252-1761. I'm going to give some instruction on how public comment will work, and then I will pause for the translator that is here today to repeat this in Spanish.
My apologies on the interruption, but I actually have a few Spanish speakers that tried that very same number you just said, and it said invalid, and so now they're in the English line only. It's not working on our end. So we tried the exact number multiple times and it is not working. I have it written down and it's not working.
Okay, so Alex, can you confirm what the number is? Or Megan?
Yes, we're confirming that now.
Okay, we're going to pause because this is really important that we accommodate the language translation.
So I just tried dialing in and the number is correct, 213-306-3065 with the meeting ID of 146-256-1761. I pressed pound and it asked for a password. You can enter password 1111 and pound, and it'll get you connected to the Spanish translation.
So to clarify, the meeting ID is 146-256-1761?
No, I'm sorry, it's 146-252-1761 pound with a password of 1111.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. Please call this number 213-306-3065 and enter this meeting ID 146-252-1761 and then hit the pound sign 1111. Let's go ahead and have the Spanish translator say that whole thing in Spanish for a minute.
Hola, soy Ana, voy a estar interpretando. Antes de pasar a la agenda de la reunión, vamos a hacer un anuncio para los que están en la llamada y a quienes les gustaría dar comentario público o que necesitan servicios de interpretación en español. Primero, ya han tenido que tener paciencia y que sigan con paciencia con nosotros debido a que tradicionalmente esta comisión no ha tenido este nivel de comentario público en una sesión virtual. Segundo, para los que han pedido traducción en español con anticipación y quienes nos han dado su información de contacto, hemos preparado servicios de interpretación en otra plataforma digital en el que actualmente están ofreciendo interpretación en español. Para cualquier persona que quiera escuchar la reunión en español, van a marcar este número 213-306-3065 y van a ingresar el número de identificación 146-252-1761 con el pound y después la contraseña es 1111. De nuevo, para los que están en esta plataforma que quieren escuchar toda la reunión en español, van a hablar el número 213-306-3065. Van a poner el número de identificación 146-252-1761 con el pound y la contraseña es 1111.
Muchas gracias. Okay, so I'm going to continue my statement, and we'll have four opportunities for public comment. We will call for public comment after each item is presented and discussed, but before the TIC, the Technology and Innovation Commission, takes a vote on each agenda item. The TIC will then have an opportunity to have additional discussion after public comment if wanted on the agenda items before taking a vote. We will also have a general public comment section at the end where speakers can speak to any items of interest to the public within the Commission's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be limited to 2 minutes per agenda item and for the general public comment section. We will be very clear on the call when it is time for public comment, and we'll ask that attendees press *3 on their phones to indicate that they want to speak. We will call on anyone who wants to speak by calling out the last 2 digits of your phone number. When you are called to speak, we will unmute you. We will then ask that you introduce yourself and provide your remarks within the 2-minute limit. We will then mute you and move on to the next public commenter. For the public who is listening to the meeting in Spanish, if you want to provide public comment, please call back into this meeting during the public comment period and press *3. The number for this meeting is published on the agenda, and it's 213-306-3065 with a meeting ID of 146-346-8576. When you begin to speak, we will have an interpreter here in this meeting to interpret your remarks to the Commission. For any of the public who would like to watch the meeting online and see the presentations, please join the meeting from your computer, tablet, or smartphone via https:// or is that / longbeach.granicus.com /view publisher /php question mark view underscore ID equals 84. It's basically go to the City of Long Beach website and navigate to city meetings and look for the Technology Innovation live meetings and hit the Technology Innovation Commission live meeting link. Please note, though, that there will be a time delay between the platform and the Granicus system. So when you hear the call for public comment, please be ready to speak. Again, please be patient with us as we navigate public comment and translation in this virtual format. I'm going to pause and just have this Spanish interpreter interpret that last section for one last time, and then we'll continue the meeting in English.
Ok, esta va a ser la última parte de instrucciones y después la reunión va a continuar en inglés. Tendremos 4 oportunidades de proveer comentario público. Pediremos comentarios públicos después que se presente y discute el punto, pero antes que el TIC, que es la Comisión de Tecnología e Innovación, vote en cada punto de la agenda. Entonces, el TIC tendrá la oportunidad de conversar más después de los comentarios públicos sobre los puntos de la agenda antes de votar. También tendremos una sección de comentario público general al final, cuando los oradores puedan hablar sobre cualquier cosa de interés del público dentro de la jurisdicción de la comisión. Cada orador tendrá 2 minutos por punto en la agenda y en la sección de comentarios públicos generales. Estaremos muy claros en la llamada cuando es el momento para comentarios públicos y pediremos que los asistentes marquen estrella 3 o asterisco 3 en sus teléfonos para indicar que quieren hablar. Llamaremos a la persona que quiere hablar usando los últimos 2 números de su teléfono. Cuando pedimos que hable, le quitaremos de silencio o pediremos que se quite de silencio oprimiendo estrella o asterisco 6. Entonces pedimos que se presente y que hable dentro del límite de 2 minutos. Entonces le pondremos en silencio y pasaremos a la siguiente persona que desea comentar. Para el público que escucha la reunión en español, si desea dar comentario público, vuelve a llamar a esta reunión durante el periodo correspondiente de comentario público y marque asterisco 3. El número para esta reunión es el mismo número 213-306-3065 y la identificación de la reunión es 146-346-8576. Cuando empieza a hablar, tendremos un intérprete aquí para interpretar sus comentarios en inglés para la comisión. Para los miembros del público que quieren mirar la reunión en línea y ver las presentaciones, puede unirse a la reunión por computadora, tableta o teléfono inteligente mediante, hay una larga dirección https longbeach.granicus.com viewpublisher.php signo de interrogación view línea ID igual 84, pero más fácil es si va al sitio web de la ciudad de Long Beach, va a hacer clic en las reuniones de la ciudad de la Comisión de Tecnología e Innovación y va a haber un enlace para la reunión en vivo. Tenga en cuenta que habrá un retraso de tiempo entre esta plataforma y el sistema Granicus, así que cuando escucha que pedimos comentario público, esté listo para hablar. Y ahora van a continuar la reunión en inglés, pero de nuevo que tengan paciencia con nosotros al navegar el comentario público y la traducción en este formato virtual.
Muchas gracias. Okay, so thank you for that. We do have 5 callers on the Spanish line platform, and they will be given 4 minutes to speak if they're requesting translation. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my executive director report.
Just a quick clarifying question, Leah, just about the written comments, public comments that we received. It looks like there was at least 3 that were forwarded to the TIC. Thank you for doing that. Will they be read into the record as at the right time as the members of the public had requested?
So Prisa, we did have them, they're loaded in Granicus for anyone to see, but I don't believe they can be read within the 2-minute time limit for each speaker. So I can defer to Art Sanchez to answer that question, but we submitted those to all the commissioners in advance, and they are located on the Granicus system in writing currently right now. If you can look at them.
Sorry, I think that's sufficient if all the commissioners are provided a copy of the statement or have access to the statement. They can review it at their own leisure throughout, I guess, this meeting. So I think that's sufficient. I don't think it's required that it be read into the record.
So one follow-up to that, what if I or someone else were to volunteer to literally take the 2 minutes and just read the statement for as long as whatever that makes up? It may not be the full written comment, but at least we do give our best effort. Just thoughts on that?
Well, I think for each of the individual commissioners, they can read it on their own. I don't think it's necessary for a commissioner to read it into the record.
Well, yes, it doesn't have to be a commissioner, it could be city staff. I was just volunteering because it's very rare that our commission receives such public comment, and I just want to be sure that every member of the public who wants to be heard and has submitted and specifically requested that their statement be read into the record, that we afford them that opportunity. And I do understand about the 2 minutes. I mean, maybe other commissioners have a thought, or Chair Schaefer, if you have a thought on this. Thank you.
I completely respect wanting to ensure that every member of the public's voice is heard. I'm already concerned that we're not going to have time for substantive discussion. It's almost 4 o'clock and we haven't even approved the minutes from last meeting. So I say if there's time, read them into the record. Otherwise, there's a possibility we'll have to table some of the discussion for our August meeting anyway. So can we sort of leave it to be determined?
I'm okay.
Well, and just for clarity, I believe that the public comment in written form is available on the city website, posted alongside this meeting, available, and anybody listening has been directed to that as well.
Thank you.
So I'd like to just continue my executive director report so we can get into the meeting in the interest of time. Just on today's agenda, we are taking up, I'm sorry, there's an echo. Can we just make sure everyone's muted? We will have 2 different presentations, and as I mentioned, there'll be opportunity for public comment on each agenda item. Since these are being presented for the first time today to the full commission, we are not expecting any recommendations to be made today by the full commission, and any recommendations can be made will be agendized for a future meeting. So I just wanted to frame that. With that, that concludes my executive director report.
Thank you, Leah. We'll go ahead and go on item number 1. Recommendation to approve the minutes from the Technology and Innovation Commission meeting held Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021.
I move approval.
I'm sorry, that was Rob?
Yep. Second, DW.
Thank you. Commissioner Gwen Schaefer?
Aye.
Vice Chair D.W. Farrell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rob Karinke?
Aye.
Commissioner Lisa Mae Brunson?
Aye.
Commissioner Justin Hectus?
I abstain. I think I was not there last month, right?
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Parisa Vincent?
Aye.
Commissioner Andrea White-Hughes?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 2 is recommendation to receive and file a presentation from the Police Department on privacy considerations and best practices associated with the use of the Los Angeles County Regional Identification System facial recognition system.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, Alex, but unless anybody has strong objections, I would like us to switch the order of items 2 and 3, just because I think it makes more sense for the police department to have an opportunity to respond to what's presented in the TIC subcommittee report. So I feel like it's just more logical for the TIC subcommittee to go first and then have us hear the question from the police.
Item number 3 would be the recommendation to receive and file a report and discussion on the Technology and Innovation Commission's Ad Hoc Committee work on facial recognition technology.
Okay, so we have a representative from the police department, our Assistant Chief Wally Hebish, will be making this presentation, so I'll be turning it over to Wally.
I thought we were going to hear from the subcommittee first.
I'm sorry.
We switched the order.
I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm a little frazzled. This is not, I'm not used to
So
this.
I know I don't use WebEx a lot, but I'm not sure if Parisa needs to be made host in order for us to see her.
So actually, yeah, so I'm turning over actually to Stephanie Zavala, who's our Long Beach Recovery Program Manager, who will frame the discussion and share her screen.
Thanks, Leah, and thank you everybody for being here this afternoon. I am Stephanie Zavala. As Leah said, I am the Long Beach Recovery Program Manager, but I began this work with the context of being the Digital Innovation Program Manager. And I am the staff person who has been supporting this ad hoc committee comprised of Commissioner Vincent and Commissioner White-Cuse as they conduct their research on facial recognition technology. And so what we have today is a presentation that will walk all of you through that research and their recommendations. So I will just provide a brief overview of what you can expect to hear today. Here. So our agenda is that the ad hoc committee will cover their process and how we began to do this work. They will cover a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the facial recognition technology. They will cover best practice research that we found about facial recognition technology as other cities and county and government agencies have been kind of using in order to frame their policy decisions. They'll walk through their own recommendations and then kind of come through a couple of discussion questions that will be discussed by the entire TIC as they decide which recommendations and what to forward on to the City Council. So with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner White-Cuse.
Good afternoon. So as an overview to the rest of the presentation, some background on the scope of work. So the City of Long Beach, in order to implement the recommended actions in its adopted racial equity and reconciliation report, is researching and evaluating facial recognition technology, also known as FRT, which aligns with Goal 3, Strategy 3, Potential Action E of the report, which includes explore the practice of facial recognition technology and other predictive policing models and their disproportionate impacts on Black people and people of color by reviewing evidence-based practices. For the purpose of this specific action, the Technology and Innovation Commission, in partnership with staff from the Technology and Innovation Department, focused specifically on FRT. And as a member of this ad hoc committee, we look forward to sharing our research and analysis with you and hearing from the Commission and the public. I'll turn the presentation over to Commissioner Vincent.
Thank you, Estefania. Thank you, Commissioner White-Cuse, for getting us started. So now sort of looking at an overview of process. January of this year, our ad hoc committee was formed to support the FRT aspect of the Racial Equity and Reconciliation Initiative. In March, research and analysis covering the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of facial recognition technology was conducted. And a quick note about that is during this time, the subcommittee was still considering the appropriateness of creating guidelines for FRT. And then since March, the subcommittee also began reviewing what other cities were doing on FRT. In April, city staff met with the police department to share the subcommittee's research. At that meeting, PD informed city staff that it was using FRT and had issued its own FRT policy, special order on facial recognition technology in March of this year. And I did notice as of yesterday morning, that policy is now up on the PD website. April of this year, as many of you know, commissioners know, we brought in an expert from the Future of Privacy Forum, and she provided an excellent overview of what other cities are doing on FRT. Next slide, please. Terms. Okay, so what is FRT? It is an automated or semi-automated process that assists in identifying or verifying an individual or in capturing information about an individual, and this is based on the physical characteristics of an individual's face. Photos, video, and real-time video surveillance are used. And facial recognition systems use computer algorithms to pick up specific distinctive details about a person's face. Next slide, please. So to kind of walk you through some highlights rather, because this was posted as part of the agenda item ahead of the meeting. Thank you, staff, for doing that. What I'm going to do is share a couple of points for each strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat slide that's basis of this SWOT analysis. So in terms of strengths, there are legitimate uses of FRT in policing, including it is primarily used to assist police in identifying or eliminating potential suspects of criminal activity. The use of FRT, along with electronic tools, can help police respond quickly to complex events such as terrorism. Next slide, please. Weaknesses, there are a number of them, ranging from demographic differences in accuracy to reliability concerns and human error to bias and privacy concerns. And this shows up highlighted in academic studies, government studies such as NIST and FBI, and other reports. Two specific details here: MIT lab researcher found that FRT failed up to 1 in 3 times when classifying the faces of Black women. Also, Black men, such as Robert Williams, have been mistakenly identified by FRT and wrongfully arrested. And one point before we move on, the subcommittee found consistently an absence of sufficient human backup identification and policies that rigorously address necessary data, civil liberties, and privacy protections. Next slide, please. Opportunities. Now, police departments can choose to build out the ecosystem needed to support a police department's ethical, equitable, and legal use of surveillance technologies, such as FRT, which requires investment of new budget, training, and resources. And something that really showed up consistently for us in our research was that taking the time to build trust of the public in police's use of surveillance technology through communication and transparency is considered a crucial step. Next slide, please. Now, about threats. If identified issues related to FRT are not effectively addressed, it could lead to erosion of public trust and claims that a city or police department is using racially biased and harmful technology. There are a number of accountability concerns with police use of FRT due to 1, lack of reporting accountability of sources and methods used by private FRT vendors to build their FRT databases. And unfortunately, Clearview AI is a great example of that. And 2, lack of transparency around and independent auditing of police use of surveillance technologies, including FRT. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's go into a little bit of an overview here of what we found in terms of policy approaches that different local governments are doing in terms of FRT. And we see that it's largely split between bans of FRT and surveillance ordinances. For roughly 17 bans against FRT are in place that are mainly focused on police and government use, with several in tandem with surveillance ordinances. About 19 surveillance ordinances are in place that are technology neutral frameworks based on expected privacy review, and these are focused on government use. A quick note is that all of these surveillance ordinances were based on the ACLU's program, Community Control Over Police Surveillance Guiding Principles. Next slide, please. So some notable highlights we wanted to share that kind of comes from the discussions that we had with other cities about FRT include Seattle. This city has a surveillance ordinance with comprehensive staffing to support it, but is now moving towards a ban on FRT. While their police department is able to use FRT, they are not currently doing so due to administrative burden and potential liability. Portland, Oregon banned FRT with some exceptions due to bias inherent within this technology and the lack of independent entities to certify algorithms, and the technology itself is bias-free. Oakland has a surveillance vetting framework or surveillance transparency ordinance in place, and this effort is led by its privacy commission, but the city has also banned FRT. This surveillance ordinance focuses on the assessment of and approval of technologies with use and impact policies and an annual reporting requirement. Next slide, please. So to wrap up sort of here real quickly because of time, research shows that generally people in the US are supportive of improved technology for police. And a 2019 Pew Research Center study found that 56% of Americans trust law enforcement agencies to use facial recognition technology responsibly. Yet, FRT has proven to be inadequately equipped to identify faces, particularly of Native American, Black, and women groups. And FRT just does not yet have the accuracy needed to be an asset to city efforts. Next slide, please. So what we have shared to this point is sort of our process, what we did as a subcommittee, the research, the analysis that we looked at, and now an outgrowth of that work are these proposed recommendations. We know that these are suggested, and we look forward to having a robust discussion by TIC and hearing from our community members. But what we found as a result of our work is that current facial recognition technologies lack appropriate accuracy and reliability and pose substantive and unequal risk to BIPOC communities due to inherent algorithmic biases and unaddressed privacy and equity issues. As such, the subcommittee suggests that the full TIC consider the following two proposed recommendations. The first is to recommend that City Council ban the use of facial recognition technology by the city, with possible consideration of narrowly defined and limited exceptions. And a quick note is that the subcommittee gave serious consideration to recommending a moratorium, but changed course after conducting best practices research. And the second recommendation, we suggest that TIC recommends that City Council adopt a surveillance vetting framework or a surveillance transparency ordinance for potential acquisition and use of surveillance technology by the city. Next slide, please. And so we are now at this lovely point of hearing from TIC and what your thoughts are, your questions are. And we're also looking forward to hearing what members of our public have to say about this. What I'll do is I'll read the questions here. These are suggested discussion questions. So that means if TIC finds them helpful, please respond. If not, please don't worry about that. But at least we have a guide of sorts. Number one, and then I'll paste these to the chat as well. The first question is that, do you have any questions on the presentation, research, and or memo? Two, are the suggested recommendations resonating with you? Do you have suggestions? Any changes? The third question is, how does our understanding of facial recognition technology change, if at all, when applying the following lenses? And the first is racial equity and justice. The second is privacy. The third is public safety. And the fourth is civil liberties and civil rights. And then the fourth suggested discussion question is, how do we meaningfully capture and center the views, ideas, and solutions from the most impacted community members, our BIPOC communities, by this technology, facial recognition technology? So what I'll do now is I will share in the chat these discussion questions, and I'll give it over to Stephania and the chair.
Okay, hold on, let me unmute. I'm wondering if it makes sense to table these questions until after we hear from the police department and that presentation, and then we will have more context, at least a more well-rounded perspective. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, or Parisa, if you're okay with that, and Andrea.
So I am, but I don't know how we will include public comment on this item because you know what I mean? How will we do it logistically?
Yeah, same question, same concern.
Well, personally, we could call for public comment now on this item. I'm going to ask Art to weigh in, our city attorney representative, on whether we can pause an item and then we'll go back to it later in the committee, or if it has to be re-agendized, the discussion gets agendized at a future meeting.
So those are two different questions. I guess the first one is if the committee or the commission decides to have public comment now, that's fine. The important thing, well, for the item, each item has the public should be given an opportunity to comment on each agenda item. So you may have to address or have public comment now before the presentation by the Long Beach Police Department. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
And I believe that we can just add those questions to the police presentation because they are applicable. So it doesn't, we don't have to kind of come back to this item. We can just discuss those items at that time.
Yeah, I think as a matter of course, we probably need to open to public comment after each agenda item, but can we just ask the public to keep in mind that these two topics are very much related and to consider that when they're making comment?
And that's fine. And again, that's fine. I mean, if the commission would like to do that, that's fine.
I would just like to make sure that we hear from everybody. There's already a comment in the chat about some of the folks in the Spanish speaking line. You know, this may take a little bit of time for translation and such. So if folks can just keep that in mind, that we want to hear from everyone. And we have to open this up after each topic, it sounds like.
So just to clarify what I'm hearing here, is it true that the commission seems like we want to hear the public comment now, but
I think we have to.
Yes, we do. Okay, good. And then we postpone the discussion of this topic until after we hear from PD. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I would recommend personally.
I'm fine with that, as long as other commissioners are fine.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then Justin
technically,
was
well-
also stressing the fact that it would make sense for the public to withhold comments if they're comfortable with it until we've heard the next presentation as well.
Right. So that's their choice, right? So Justin, thank you for
Yes,
making
of course.
clear that they are connected and it's true. And if public member of public wants to give public comment twice on both of these agenda items, I think that they're perfectly empowered to do that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So why don't we open it up to the public for comment?
Okay, so we are opening it to the public for public comment. Any Spanish-speaking speakers who would like to provide public comment need to call back into this meeting. And while they're doing that, we'll go ahead with the people who are in this meeting. And if you want to speak, we're asking you to hit *3 on your phone. But I'm going to assume, I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand. Okay, yeah. Yes. Okay, so if you want to speak, hit *3 and we'll be calling on you. And we'll make sure we pause for any Spanish speakers who want to come back into this meeting to be able to come in and raise their hands.
And could we please give the number again, the call-in number for both Spanish and not Spanish?
Yes, so this meeting is 213-306-3065 is our call-in number. And the meeting ID for this meeting is 146-346-8576. And I know the Spanish interpreters are repeating that in Spanish. Ryan Kurtzman is going to be helping us with calling for public comment.
And could we please put the call numbers into the chat as well, please? Thank you.
I'm sorry, what?
Can we put the call-in numbers in the chat as well?
Oh, well, no one can see the chat who are called in, so that's yeah. So that's why they watch it on Granicus.
And I think it's at the top of the chat already.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, maybe we should wait another 30 seconds for folks to raise their hand and we can get started with public comment.
Looks like we have 2 people raising their hands so far. Ryan.
Okay, we can go ahead and get started. So why don't we start with the extension ending in 4-9. If you'd like to go ahead, as a reminder, you have 2 minutes, and please introduce yourself and provide your remarks within the 2-minute time frame, please. Thanks. Again, whoever has the extension 4-9, please provide your public comment.
Did we unmute them?
Yeah, somebody has to unmute.
I think they need to unmute their own phones.
Okay, now
Here we go.
You heard that? Am I heard?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear you now.
My name is Greg Buell, and I'm with the group checklbpd.org that originally uncovered the facial recognition program. But with my time today, I'd like to read the statement the ACLU submitted on this item, and it went as follows. My name is Mohammed Tassar, and I am the Senior Staff Attorney at the ACLU of Southern California. I speak to lend ACLU of Southern California's support for the Commission's recommendation that the City Council ban the use of facial recognition in the City of Long Beach without exception. We appreciate this Commission for investigating Long Beach Police Department's heretofore covert use of facial recognition, and believe it is critical that this Commission and every stakeholder within the City of Long Beach categorically oppose face recognition by all city departments, including and especially the police department. We urge this Commission to make that recommendation for 3 reasons. First, face recognition is a dangerous and invasive surveillance tool that has no place in the city and in a free society. It provides a mechanism for cheap and easy monitoring of individuals that impedes people's ability to live freely, associate with whoever they wish, and express themselves without fear of intrusion and tracking. It creates and exploits data about people's biometrics, none of which we can alter or amend, in ways that make abuse, tracking, monitoring, and surveillance cheap, easy, and likely. It is unjust and racist. It facilitates repressive police practices that already target vulnerable populations. This is true even for any proposed exception to a complete ban on the technology. Any exception is likely to swallow the rule and facilitate the same abuse we are concerned about. It provides an entryway to legitimizing the technology in dangerous ways, in ways that are dangerous to a free society. Second, face recognition is broken and results in frequent misidentifications, false arrests, and unjust outcomes. The technology is being peddled as very accurate.
All right, thank you for your public comment. We'll next go to the person who called in with the extension of 1-8. If you'd like to go ahead, please.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Tessa. And first of all, I want to say it's a breath of fresh air to see this work being done as a concerned resident and someone who works in the field of AI software and works in, software built for governments. I really strongly support the work going on here and the recommendations in this memo. However, I do have a few pieces of feedback that I'd like the group to consider. I think there's a real opportunity here to engage more with community groups like LBIRC. If you haven't already, to figure out some of the details that I think could be fleshed out here a little bit more, as well as to incorporate the research of groups like Check LBPD more. I think any analysis here is incomplete without taking more fully into account the local history and the history of lack of transparency, specifically from Long Beach PD. And so I think that's something that could be part of this research a little bit more and could lend more to this. So like a few questions that I had when I was reading this, well, there's a lot of questions, probably more than I could list here, but I wanted mostly to make the statement of like, I think there's a real opportunity here to engage with groups, with more groups locally. A bunch of questions come to mind about, who exactly is included when you say it can't be used by city employees, and what is the nature of what a surveillance vetting framework might look like in the near term?
All right, thank you for your public comment. And actually, if you wouldn't mind, the caller from extension 18, if you wouldn't mind sharing your first and last name just very quickly, we'd appreciate that for our records.
My name is Tessa Cole.
Great. Thank you so much, Tessa. We'll next move on to our next public comment. I see an extension ending in 5-2. If you'd like to go ahead, we'll go ahead and start your 2 minutes whenever you start speaking.
Hi there, can you hear me? This is Audrina Redmond.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great, because I'm hearing you at 2 different speeds here between the computer and the phone. I'm with Black Lives Matter Long Beach, and I just want to remind the commissioners that Long Beach Police Department has a history of lying, and lying by omission, not only with this facial recognition technology, but with something called Tiger Text, for example, if you all know anything about that. I won't go into that because I have limited time, but look it up. We have no oversight in this city of our police department, and yet why would we be trusting them with a tool that criminalizes people, that particularly criminalizes Black faces, because the technology has a difficult time recognizing Black faces? We already know that Black people and brown people are criminalized in this city and are over-policed in our communities in a way that people who live in District 3, for example, are not. In a way that people who live in District 4, for example, are not. Or a way that people who live in District 5 are not policed and over-policed in the same way. And so this is akin to gang injunctions, which we know set a lot of people down a path of being vilified and criminalized for a very long time, even if they had reformed themselves or if they were ever really involved in gang activity. So I am encouraging this commission to push back and not to slow down this process and even ban this facial recognition technology until and unless we have some way to really monitor and have some real effective oversight of the police department, which we do not in this city. And if you follow an organization, I want to thank Greg Buell for his work too, but if you follow Stop LAPD Spying and you look at the kinds of technology that Los Angeles PD uses, that the sheriff department uses, that police departments use, you have to ask yourself, why do we want to be surveilled in that way, particularly by an entity that failed our...
All right, thank you so much for your comment. That was the 2-minute mark. I do not see any other hands raised or requests for comment at this time.
Yeah, right. Let's pause to make sure any Spanish speakers were able to move over and have the opportunity to speak. Hablar español prima tres. And yeah, can you just translate that real quick? Translator. If there's
Solo
any...
si hay alguien en este cuarto que quiere hablar, hacer un comentario público en español, van a poner el asterisco 3 para decir que quiere levantar la mano para hablar.
Thank you. We'll pause and see if there are any other hands are raised.
And could we just remind callers about how to unmute themselves?
I believe you can hit *6 on your phone or your unmute on your phone, smartphone.
Para poder quitarse de silencio va a ser el asterisco 6 para poder hablar.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Commissioner Vincent, I'm not going to start the 2-minute timer until the individual starts speaking and is unmuted.
Yes, no, I understand. Thank you, Ryan.
I'm not seeing any additional hands raised, so I think we're okay for this item, and we'll give even more space for the next item for public comment.
Okay, so Alex, can you read the next agenda item, please?
We have to take a vote. We have to.
Oh. Okay.
As long as we're clear about what the vote is and that we're going to be discussing this item at the conclusion of the next item.
Yeah, so, I was just going to say, the vote would be to receive and file this presentation, receipt of this presentation, but it would not preclude further discussion on the information that you presented to us.
Yes, that is correct, just to receive and file the presentation. Do we have a first? Do we have a motion?
DW.
Second.
I'm sorry, was that Commissioner Karinki as second?
Yes.
It was.
Thank you. Chair Gwen Schaefer?
Aye.
Vice Chair DW Farrell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rob Karinki?
Aye.
Commissioner Lisa Mae Brunson?
Aye.
Commissioner Justin Hectus?
Aye.
Commissioner Parisa Vincent?
Aye.
Commissioner Andrea White-Hughes?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 2, recommendation to receive and file a presentation from the Police Department on privacy considerations and best practices associated with the use of the Los Angeles County Regional Identification System, facial recognition system.
Okay, now I'll turn it over to Assistant Chief Wally Hebish to make the presentation.
Great, thank you, Leah. And I'm going to try to share my screen here with everyone. So I hope everyone can see that okay.
Yep.
So just first off, I want to thank the chair, the vice chair, and the commissioners. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to present on this very important topic. I'll be providing the commission with an overview on our use of facial recognition within the Los Angeles County Regional Identification System, or LACRIS. And so I wanted to start today this presentation with an overview of our department's core values, which you see here. I think it's really important to understand how these values influence and guide what we do, including our participation in LACRIS and how we use this system to keep our community safe. So the first one to the left is ethics, and that's really about policing in a constitutional manner and serving everyone in our community fairly and equally. The second in the middle there is intelligence, and this speaks to policing in a manner that promotes creativity and innovation and utilizing best practices. This is similar to what's outlined in Pillar 3 from President Obama's Task Force Report on 21st Century Policing and the use of technology in policing. And then third is respect, and that's understanding that everyone matters and all people shall be treated with dignity and respect. These values guide our actions, including our use of LACRIS or any other technology that improves efficiency in terms of public safety. And for a more detailed description, you can find our core values on our police department website. So what is LACRIS and how is it used by the Long Beach Police Department? LACRIS is a regional database that contains arrest information from throughout the county. Our use of LACRIS is specific to a digital mugshot database which contains booking photos of arrestees. LACRIS information never stands by itself, and information we obtain from LACRIS must be corroborated through a fair and thorough investigative process. Only our employees trained on the use and policies of LACRIS are authorized to use this system. The training they receive is consistent with the same training provided by the FBI on the use of facial recognition technology. LACRIS is not a platform that we utilize to predict behavior like some predictive policing software solutions. LACRIS is not used for racial profiling of anyone. Racial profiling is not only unethical and unlawful, but against department policy. And LACRIS is not used for mass surveillance. LACRIS is not baked into city security cameras, and it's not used to monitor or scan crowds. The only photographs that we place into the LACRIS system are those associated with a criminal investigation. And so below here, you'll see a couple of circles in green there on how we do use LACRIS. Again, LACRIS is an investigative tool to be used during a criminal investigation. Possible candidates in LACRIS must be corroborated through further investigation, and searches are based on reasonable suspicion and not to randomly identify people. This is just an investigative resource to help develop further leads in a criminal investigation. And before I show you some examples of how the LACRIS workflow looks, I want to share 5 key points from the LACRIS Statement of Record regarding transparency and law enforcement use of LACRIS. 1, the system is for law enforcement purposes only. An additional investigation is needed for each LACRIS search. LACRIS searches are also followed up by human review. 2, the use of the system is subject to routine audits to prevent misuse. This includes audits from LACRIS staff in the Department of Justice, which completed an audit of our use in June of 2021. 3, facial recognition in LACRIS is not identification of a suspect and can't be used as the sole basis for an arrest or detention. 4, LACRIS is not surveillance. It does not record, scan, process, or save live video feeds. And 5, again, reiterating that this is a tool to produce a potential investigative lead, and it requires corroboration before any action is taken. So now a few examples of the workflow in LACRIS. As we all know, on May 31st, 2020, several businesses were the victims of mass looting and vandalism. The examples I'm sharing today are from investigations that took place as a result of some of the crimes that were committed. The first example shows still shots of surveillance video from a local convenience store. In the video, the subject is observed entering the closed business illegally and leaving with 2 boxes of merchandise, including clothing and liquor. Detectives reviewed security video from the liquor store and were able to capture a still image of the subject's face, which you see here below the security footage. That image was then placed into the LACRIS booking photo database to the left, where a possible candidate is provided to detectives as a potential lead. Detectives then gathered further information and corroborated that information. After completing a thorough investigation, the case was presented to the district attorney for filing consideration. The district attorney reviewed the completed case file and subsequently charged the suspect with 1 felony count of looting. The second example I'll share involves another individual that participated in criminal behavior on May 31st. Here you see security camera footage from 3 separate locations in the city of Long Beach. The first security video shows the subject illegally entering a local clothing store and exiting the vandalized location with numerous clothing items. The second video shows what appears to be the same individual vandalizing and looting from a local cell phone store. The individual not only damaged property, but also stole 2 cash registers and numerous cell phones, totaling over $150,000 in loss. And the third location shows the individual as he burglarized a local jewelry store. At this location, the subject was able to steal over 1,000 pieces of jewelry worth more than $180,000. Here you see the close-up from security video that shows a very distinct tattoo on the subject's face and also on his arm. The tattoos, the similar clothing, and the still image of the subject's face are all part of the investigation to identify the individual responsible for these crimes. Like before, a still image of the subject's face was taken from security footage. Again, on the left, you see that the image was placed into the LACRIS digital mugshot system and a possible candidate was provided. Using this lead, detectives conducted further investigation and presented the completed case to the district attorney. The DA reviewed the entire case, which included additional looting locations, and filed 7 felony burglary charges against the suspect. The last part of the workflow I want to share is another reminder of some of the additional resources that could be used to complete an investigation. LACRIS is only one piece of the puzzle. It's a lead that must be corroborated, and there are several ways that this can be done. Witnesses might provide a vehicle description or a license plate number from a crime scene. A news outlet might air a video broadcast showing an individual involved in a crime. Sometimes suspects even brag about their crimes by placing images or videos on open source public social media platforms. These are just some of the considerations that take place during a fair and thorough investigation. So this slide, I just really wanted to briefly highlight some of the results of our employees produced after the crimes that occurred on May 31st. Several employees were taken from their regular assignments and placed on a looting task force. These employees worked around the clock reviewing evidence, which included thousands of hours of security video, and followed up on all of their investigative leads. Thanks to their hard work, over 90 arrests were made. This was very impressive work by both our sworn and professional staff. In addition to what I've already shared, I want to talk a little bit more about what guides our use of systems such as LACRIS. First and foremost, it's ensuring the ethical and lawful use of the system to uphold the rights of all people. And that's captured in many of our current and pending policies, a few of which you see here. Our general responsibilities and conduct toward the public. These policies direct employees on the equal treatment of all persons, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, social status, etc. Employees are directed to remain impartial and reminded that all citizens are guaranteed equal protection under the law. Next is our fair and bias-free policing policy. This policy strictly prohibits biased policing and racial profiling during the enforcement of laws or any other service we provide. This policy crosses over into other policies in that it requires supervisors to ensure compliance. This also applies to the use of LACRIS and the special order, which you see listed here as well. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what special orders are and give the Commission an understanding of how we use special orders. And these are really to provide immediate direction to employees while a more comprehensive policy is created, reviewed, and integrated into our department policy manual. This special order mandates that any use of facial recognition technology does not violate the privacy rights of anyone and calls out constitutional amendments pertaining to the protection of privacy, specifically the First, Fourth, and 14th Amendments. The comprehensive policy currently being developed will build upon the current supervisory oversight and the random audits outlined in the special order. The way it's going to do that is by requiring routinely scheduled multi-level reviews of the department's use of facial recognition technology. So when we evaluate practices or processes like in the use of LACRIS, we have three main areas of consideration. Best practices. What are other law enforcement agencies in our region doing to reduce and solve crimes? What tools are effective and what tools present challenges? In the case of LACRIS, 64 agencies in our region are currently using the system. We also participate in many professional organizations, such as the Major City Chiefs Association and the LA County Police Chiefs Association. Along with representatives from these groups, several robust discussions take place on the current state and future of policing. We also look at academic research. Academic think tanks, such as the Police Executive Research Forum, or PERF, study a variety of issues in policing and provide best practice recommendations to law enforcement leaders across the country. The next area we look at involves legal mandates. Our use of systems such as LACRIS must be consistent with local, state, and federal law. For example, California prohibits the use of body-worn camera video with facial recognition technology. This prohibition is also written into our current special order. Another example is the Long Beach Values Act, which prohibits us from participating in civil immigration enforcement. This is also written into our facial recognition special order. And the third area of consideration involves partnerships. Much of our success is dependent on partnerships. Through our Office of Constitutional Policing, we've established a community advisory group. This group represents the diversity that is Long Beach, with representatives from a variety of backgrounds, including the ACLU and local faith-based organizations. The Community Advisory Group provides an external review of policy creation and revision. We also have an internal policy review committee that meets with department representatives and labor organizations to provide valuable input on how tools and practices might impact employee efficiency and wellness. And we also engage and collaborate with city departments. Collaboration and discussion with policymakers and city department representatives is essential in moving forward and providing optimal service to our community. For example, our partners in the Office of Equity and the Department of Technology and Innovation work with staff from our department on issues related to equity, such as the the framework for reconciliation and the goals that this commission is working on, such as addressing facial recognition technology. Lastly, I'd like to add that the collection and evaluation of information is critical to the day-to-day operations of law enforcement. We do this on behalf of our public, and we remain focused on arresting those that choose to victimize and threaten the safety of our community members. We've used digital evidence to solve major crimes against businesses, investigate lower level crimes that have made an emotional or traumatic impact on our community, and also to bring closure to families and friends of victims of violent crimes, including the tragic shooting that occurred on 7th Street during a Halloween party in 2019, which resulted in the death of 3 people and injuries to many more. Like with all systems we use, we must ensure we continue to use LACRIS in an ethical, lawful, and responsible manner, and we're committed to doing just that. Thank you for taking the time to hear my presentation, and I'm free to answer any questions you may have.
So I do have, I've narrowed my questions down to like 4, but I would start with just 2 to ensure my fellow commissioners have time to comment. But Chair Schaefer, did you want to say something first?
That's okay. Go ahead, Parisa.
Okay, wonderful. So first, thank you, Assistant Chief Habish, for coming today and sharing about your department's use of FRT. This kind of transparency only makes the city better, and I hope this practice will continue. So now moving on to questions. The first one, the way that I see it, before we can talk about best practices about the LBPD use of FRT, there's a question of whether the city and LBPD should even be using this technology, considering that there are unresolved bias, privacy, and civil liberties issues inherent within this technology. LBPD made the choice on its own a decade ago that it would use FRT, and it did so without the knowledge of or input by the public. But in light of the protests here in Long Beach last summer following the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent racial equity and reconciliation framework process that was launched, it is important that we as a city ask ourselves this question that I'm now posing to you. Beyond anecdotal evidence, what evidence and reasons does LBPD have to justify using FRT when considering the disproportionate impact of this technology on our city's BIPOC community residents?
So thank you for your question. It's a very broad question, and there's a lot of commentary in there. But I will say this, that if you look at the way that we are using facial recognition technology, I believe that question paints it with a very broad brush. And our use of the LACRIS system is similar to what we did pre-LACRIS with booking photo hard copies and going through booking photos to try to identify suspects responsible for crime. So I think when you're talking about things like Clearview AI and some of the other facial recognition technology, that's a different conversation. And I think in my presentation, you could see we have a variety of mechanisms in place for oversight and compliance to ensure it's not being used in a way that is racially biased. I think that, there was a lot there, so I'm hoping that answers your question.
Yes, no, I understand, and thank you for being here again and for taking a stab at that question. It is a challenging thing and something that the city overall has to reckon with, right? So I guess there's a nice flow to my next question, and it specifically goes to racial equity and civil liberties and civil rights issues. We know from the PRA requests and responses that use of FRT by LBPD significantly increased in 2020, which was also a time when PD did not have a formal FRT policy in place. And according to the letter that Greg Buell of Check LBPD sent to our commission on this agenda item, quote, the LBPD went from running an average of 121 searches per year on LACRIS from 2010 to 2019, with a maximum of 622 searches in 2019 to running 2,688 searches in the first 10 months of 2020. There has been no explanation offered to explain the increase in lacrosse use other than to point to the looting that took place last summer in Long Beach. However, the estimates for the number of looters in Long Beach was 200 to 300, which does not explain the 2,000 plus extra searches, unquote. So my question to you, Assistant Chief Habish, is actually more of a three-part question. What is the reason for the significantly increased number of FRT searches within the first 10 months of 2020? And how was FRT deployed during and after the civil unrest that was in response to the murder of George Floyd? And lastly, what steps were taken to mitigate the inherent civil liberties, civil rights, privacy, and equity issues inherent within this technology? And I realize that was quite a lot, so I can repeat if need be.
No, and I think that's fine. And I've received those same questions. And I disagree a little bit with the phrasing of that question in that we have responded to that individual. And the increase is something that probably has to do with the civil unrest that took place. Again, I hope that everybody understood the presentation in that the way that we use facial recognition technology is not in a manner to surveil the public or to identify people that are exercising their First Amendment rights. It's based on a crime and reasonable suspicion and an investigative lead. So as I mentioned in my presentation, there were quite a few crimes that took place on May 31st. There was a lot of security video that was reviewed by our staff and our employees to ensure that we could bring closure to the owners of those businesses and the people in this community. So I think that it almost feels like this is similar to many of the PRAs that we've received and responded to. But I would be happy to come back with more detailed information if you want to submit maybe those questions in writing. But I think that this is something I would have to discuss with our staff because again, we've received those PRAs and those same questions and responded to them. And it is I hear a lot of statement and opinion in that I don't think is appropriate for this platform.
So thank you, Assistant Chief Habish, for your response. And I do think it's relevant, but I mean, we have a difference of opinion here and I understand that. Of course, if you would be willing to come back to talk more, specifically, of course, we would love to have that. In my opinion, that's my one voice, right? And you know, just because you have the police department's answered PRAs doesn't mean that the public has heard the responses. And this is really the first opportunity that our Long Beach community members have had to really talk about and reckon with this issue of facial recognition technology. So I'm going to cede my time and see what other questions commissioners may have. I do have other questions, but
I would like to add though briefly that I am always happy, willing, and I'm happy to come back and discuss issues. I just, again, this is more repetitive information that has been provided to us. So I certainly want to share the way we police this community and with the public. And I think the entire public is entitled to that information.
If I can go next, I have a couple of questions and comments. Well, first, just as a follow-up to Commissioner Van Zant's question, I'm wondering, Assistant Chief Habish, if you might be able to provide the commission with response to the PRAs that was developed, because maybe that would be useful for us to see if you feel like this question has been answered, if that would be possible.
Yeah, so I think it would be. We have an entire PRA unit that responds to PRAs that we receive. So that is something, you know, my intent was to explain how we use the LACRA system and how our use of facial recognition technology is done for the benefit of public safety. So those specific questions, if you want to send them over to me, I'm willing to go back to staff and try to get some information related to the PRAs and what we're discussing here today. So absolutely, if you want to send that over, we'll see if we can provide information on that.
Okay, we can follow up on that. Thank you. And then my sort of first comment leading into the question is, I hear a couple of different concerns about the use of FRT. One is the technology itself and the algorithm that has a history of misidentifying people of color and women and just minority groups in general. And so that's the technology concern. And then we're also hearing in the public comments a lot of concern that stems from distrust of the police department and the public talking about a history of secrecy and police abuse. And so I think there's, two things at play. And in your presentation, you talked about accountability and the routine audits that are conducted to ensure that FRT is being used in an unbiased and fair way, and in a limited way as well. And so I'm wondering, if in order to speak to some of the concerns related to distrust, if those audits or measures for accountability could also be made public, or at least shared with our commission, so we have what was the outcome of those audits? And it seems like just more transparency would go a long way in assuaging some of the concerns.
Yeah, thank you. And so the audit that I mentioned in my presentation by the DOJ found us to be in compliance with the use of LACRIS. And then the comprehensive policy that is being developed that I mentioned in my presentation will involve scheduled multi-layer reviews, and we certainly can discuss how that information can be presented back to the public. It's not anything our department is shying away from. I'm happy to share that information, but that would have to be built into our policy, and we'd have to have an internal discussion and determine how best to provide that information. But yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a question. Kind of building on Chair Schaefer's question about the technology itself, setting the ethical questions aside, there's been, as she mentioned, accusations levied that this technology just plainly doesn't work for certain folks. Is that, I don't know if this is the right phrasing, but is that like a vendor specific issue? Has that been found to be across all the providers of this facial recognition technology? Has the city considered, a variety of different providers that may or may not have those issues?
So thank you. I think that question is for me. And I don't profess to be an expert in the use of technology or facial recognition, but I am very familiar with code bias and algorithms that show bias, and the fact that technology is flawed and there is always a margin for error. That is something, again, when I go through our best practices in my presentation and talk about the areas that we look at, those are the discussions that we have with our Office of Constitutional Policing, with the Office of Equity. As a matter of fact, I gave this same presentation to them yesterday. So there's a variety of different ways that facial recognition technology can be used outside of just law enforcement. I'm sure all of you have heard from your ad hoc committee on Clearview AI and Amazon Recognition and some of the other platforms that have been used in the study out of MIT. But that's in business in general. That's not just law enforcement. That is, I think we all used our faces to unlock our phones today, and that data is collected by private businesses. So the way that we are using facial recognition technology today is what I outlined in my presentation, and it's much different than randomly identifying individuals and monitoring live feeds and matching that up against arrest information. It's very different than that. So I think if you're talking about the variety of platforms, the one that we use is through LA County, and they are the administrators of that system. And it is all based on arrest information. So it's fingerprints, it's booking photos, it's names, it's date of birth. It's the same arrest information that we used when I first became a police officer. It's just now it's more efficient through the use of technology. But I'll go back to my first point. There's always a margin for error with technology, which is why you have to have oversight, which is why I'm sitting before you fine people today explaining this.
I'm just curious to know oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Lisa May.
Well, I just was curious about the percentage in which this technology has been accurate in apprehending the right suspects.
So I would thank you for that question. This technology, LACRIS, is not used to apprehend the suspects. It's used to develop an investigative lead that has to be corroborated. So there's additional information. So that's why I wanted to highlight some of the samples in the way it was used and show you how it was presented to the district attorney. So it's not used solely to apprehend or arrest suspects. It must be based on a crime. It must be corroborated, and it must include additional information in the investigation. So I could not go into LACRIS with a photo of someone who I believe committed a crime, get a candidate identified, and then go arrest that person and use that as my case. You have to have a total investigation that covers all areas and all evidence and present that to the district attorney or city prosecutor who would review that information and for filing consideration. So it would be, that would, separating that out from a total investigation wouldn't be an accurate count of how many cases were rejected or filed by the district attorney.
So,
Officer Bish, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What was the name of the policy that is currently being developed that covers this?
That's the facial recognition technology policy.
Okay.
So that's building upon the current special order.
Okay. So as of right now, there's a special order that includes facial recognition technology, but there's no policy governing it, correct?
No, that's incorrect, because our special order acts as a policy until the comprehensive policy is developed and implemented into the manual. The special order is to take direct, immediate action when we identify a need for that. And so the special order that governs our action. So that is policy for now, but there will be a more comprehensive policy. For example, our special order includes random audits of the use of LACRIS. The policy that's being developed is more concise and involves regularly scheduled multi-level reviews of the system. And then that policy will go to our community advisory group, where they will take an outside look at it. We'll get input from, as I mentioned, we have a member from the ACLU and faith-based groups in the community. We'll get input from those different groups, and then we'll implement the policy. It'll go through the typical looping that it goes through within our organization, and then entered into our policy manual. But just to be clear, the special order acts as policy now.
Okay, and my line of question has to do with trust building, so thank you for indulging me. Do you know generally when the special order was released by the police department to the public?
It was just, you mean on our website, posted on our website?
Yeah, or any dissemination. But
yeah, so it was put on our public-facing website just this week. So our policies and special orders are available to the public. This one just was not posted until this week.
Okay, thank you. And I think that really speaks to where we're at right now. There's some trust building that needs to happen, and I have a ton of respect for our officers and for you. And I actually think that the approach you guys are taking, using it as a tool and not an end guide, and not mixing it up with video surveillance, is, you know, from just a pure technology standpoint, I can see that being beneficial for the public. But we're in a situation right now where there's some trust lost, trust needs to be regained. So for me, it's a hard stop on facial recognition used at all until it goes through the process. And I know you're going through the policy building, and also our subcommittee recommended a framework, and those will build trust. But until that trust is built up, everything's going to be suspect. So that's where I stand. I invite your comments, but I'm really at this point just making a statement.
Sure. I mean,
I
if
have
you,
another question, if
I'm sorry.
unless anyone who hasn't spoken wants to go first.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go for it.
Thank you. So given that this agenda item and this research comes from within the construct of the Racial Equity and Reconciliation Report, I think it's important to focus on the aspects that have been most problematic to racial equity. And one of the things that's been problematic with facial recognition technology itself, and granted there are many different ways that we all use it in many different ways, but that I appreciate the to me it sounds like what we're working toward here is collaborating to I should say review, that's not the word I want to use, but there's a concern about effective oversight. There's a deeper concern as well about effective systems of oversight and auditing for these types of systems. And so I think that from the committee's, well, I won't speak for the committee, from my standpoint, as you move forward with developing your review and auditing process, I would look forward to this committee working with you on reviewing what those processes are that have in different areas of FRT been problematic in the past, especially for racial equity.
Thank you for that. And I just want to clarify too that there is an audit process for this, and that process is through, again, as I mentioned, through the LACRA staff and then also the Department of Justice, and built into the special order / policy that's currently in place. So the auditing and the review, it's also the responsibility of our supervisors in policy and in training to ensure compliance. So could it be more detailed and more robust? Absolutely, and we'd be happy to collaborate. That's why we've developed our community advisory group as well, and the city partnerships and working with members of the community are always accepted by our organization. And I just also want to share too, when we talk about the way that we're using this system, it's important to note that our focus is on the victims of crime, and specifically violent crime. And this is, if we're using a system in a lawful and ethical manner, we're going to use it to bring closure to the families and victims of those crimes. And we need to, as a community, to keep this community safe. And I can't tell you how many times I've been asked by community members about the use of video, and if there was security footage, and are we going to arrest the person responsible for the desecration of symbols in our community, like the Martin Luther King statue that was vandalized a few weeks ago. Those are important questions and important considerations. We recently had an LGBTQ+ flag that was burned at Harvey Milk Park. I don't think there's anybody who wouldn't want us to be able to use video, security video, to find those responsible. Those are important issues. And when I talk about lower level crimes that have an impact, an emotional or a traumatic impact on our community, those are the types of things that I'm talking about. So consideration should always be given to the victims and how we're using this lawful and legal tool to advocate on behalf of the victims and bring closure to those cases. So I thank you for your comments as well, and I appreciate that.
I have a question. Well, one is to clarify earlier when you said that this is a county administered program. Do I understand then that the city of Long Beach opts into something that is administered by the county sheriff's department? Is that a correct statement?
That is correct.
Okay. And then, and forgive me, this is a complicated subject, so forgive me if you address this, but is there passive collection of video footage of people walking around in Long Beach in public spaces that is then stored for later utilization by this system?
No, so we don't randomly use footage of crowds to try to identify people. Again, just used solely for the purpose of criminal investigations. And if you think of the LACRIS digital mugshot system as what we would have called a mugshot book, 25, 30 years ago, where somebody who's arrested, a photo goes into a mugshot book, and a detective would receive a case and sift through hundreds of pages of arrest information and mugshots to try to find somebody that would be a potential lead for them to investigate. And so this is really using technology to make it a digital environment and make investigations much more efficient, but not for the purposes of random surveillance or scanning crowds and holding on to videos and images of the public for in the event that there was a crime to be later committed.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So a quick follow-up on that is that I have the FRT here, and I'm very confused as to why the Long Beach Police Department is saying this is point number 3 under the section of use of facial recognition, and point number 3 states the Long Beach Police Department may elect to integrate the use of facial recognition technology with its public safety video surveillance. So what I'm confused about is, number one, why is that there in this facial recognition special order? 2, why is it there considering that LACRIS prohibits the use of live FRT, and that is due to its extremely high rates of inaccuracy and unreliability. And so basically, to recap, why is the Long Beach Police Department electing to or reserving the right to integrate the use of live FRT, and this could potentially open the door to community concerns around mass surveillance. So that would be my question. Thank you.
So that specific item, and thank you for the question, that specific item in the special order is something that will be discussed and addressed, because we do not conduct mass surveillance, and we do not use LACRIS for live video feeds, because it's not built into any of the systems that we have in place. So again, the special order is for a direct and immediate addressing of an issue that comes up, and then the more comprehensive policy is to address those issues, just as the one that you've explained from the special order.
Yes, so thank you for that. I guess I'm just confused as to why it's in this policy if LACRIS itself is prohibiting use of live FRT, and knowing that PD has used, I think it was 2.5 years worth of a trial with Vigilant Solutions, and I understand that Vigilant Solutions has a product that is live FRT. So that was basically, I was wondering, are you possibly considering a different solution, FRT solution, besides the current one, which is what you said, which is the LACRIS system?
No, and we do not use and have not purchased the Vigilant Solution facial recognition technology. So a couple of things there. One, again, that information was probably, and our policies are developed by groups of employees, and that was probably put into the special order to account for any future technology that might be beneficial. But that is being removed from the comprehensive policy, like I said, because of the discussion and review process. Now, the other part of your question on the Vigilant Solutions, we have also found, like with any organization, sometimes demos and trials of different types of platforms are conducted, and we had to put a policy in place to address that as well and ensure that any technology product that is available goes through command level approval, goes through a technology service request that would go to the city attorney's office and the city manager's office. So there's a policy to address that as well. But the special order section that you're referring to is that will come out of the comprehensive policy that's being developed as well.
Thank you for that. And I do have some follow-up questions, but I also want to give space for other commissioners to ask questions.
This is Justin. I would appreciated the subcommittee report and appreciated the report from the assistant chief, and I would yield any time to the public for comment.
I was actually going to make the same point. It's after 5 p.m. and I'm sure we have quite a few members of the public who would like to comment. So if commissioners are okay with it, because I think there obviously will be opportunity for us to continue the discussion at our August meeting. And out of respect for the public who've been waiting an hour and a half, I think now would be a good time to take comment.
Okay, so same thing as the earlier item. Any member of the public who would like to speak, please hit *3 on your phone to raise your hand, and we'll call on you one by one.
Thank you, Leah. Let's wait another 15, 20 seconds, and then we'll start with public comment.
And is it *6 to unmute from their phone?
I will be calling on people, Commissioner Farrow, and unmuting them, and then they can press *6 or press the unmute button within their own smartphone. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the caller from extension 33. If you'd like to unmute yourself, and also please state your name as well before you start your comment. Thank you.
Can I make the request to also have that announcement made in Spanish, as we're having Spanish speakers switch over to the English line, please?
Yes, so can we have our translator also repeat that, and then also say that each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak.
Los que desean hablar van a marcar *3 para levantar la mano, y ya cuando les toca, cuando dicen los últimos 2 números de su teléfono, va a marcar *6 para quitarse de silencio. Y también van a tener 2 minutos para hablar.
Thank you. So we'll start public comment with the caller from extension 33. If you'd like to go ahead, unmute yourself.
Por si acaso, es el número que termina con 33, si quiere marcar *6 para hablar. Sorry, I just wasn't sure if it's a Spanish speaker whose number ends like that.
Ryan, maybe we should circle back to that person at the end if they might be having technology issues.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's move on to the next speaker who's queued up. Jamilet, if you'd like to go ahead, please, and unmute yourself.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Jamilet, and I am a community organizer with the Long Beach Immigrants' Rights Coalition. I have a few questions to ask. How many impacted community members speaking against this invasive, racist, criminalizing technologies is it going to take for people to just even hesitate on giving more funding to these technologies? Last week's Public Safety Committee meeting, there was over 7 speakers against them, concerned, worried about their own family and lives. Listen to the communities who are most impacted by this, not the department who is being thrown additional funding to use these technologies to keep filling already overcrowded cages with community members that are from our very own homes. The safest communities have the most resources, not the most policing. Listen to the voices who are impacted by these decisions. LBPD spends millions of dollars every year on invasive surveillance technology. Whether they want to call it surveillance or not, we know that it does this to our communities because it is our lived experience. Speaking about the Long Beach Values Act, as mentioned in the presentation, LBPD still shared data, license plate reader data with ICE and other federal immigration authorities until, as of recently, in the month of April. Let that sink in. This was a promise that was made before this happened, and even till now, saying that the Long Beach Values Act was honored, but it was not. In June 2021, the police department promised to stop sharing license plate data with any out-of-state federal agencies. It is vitally important that the police departments keeps this promise, and any out-of-state or federal agencies, it is vitally important that they keep this promise and that it provides documentation to prove that it is following through. Now, the Los Angeles Fusion Center must no longer have access to this data. This fusion.
Thank you so much for your comment. Let's move on to the next speaker now. Again, we have 2 minutes for public comment for each speaker. Let's move on to the caller with the phone number ending in 49. Again, you have 2 minutes, and just please state your name as you begin speaking. Thank you.
Hi, this is Greg Buell, and I'm with checklbpd.org. I was the one that actually uncovered the LBPD's facial recognition program back in November. I've also filed a lot of other PRA requests about it. Mr. Hebish kind of referred to them during his statements, and contrary to what he said, he absolutely has not responded to all of them. The main one I'm missing is the one that will show how facial recognition was used last year. Just it'd be the dates of the searches, the type of case they were on, and the reason for the search. Both the LBPD and Locris have refused to turn that document over.
No, cuando te digan cuando me toca.
I think, go ahead, please, yes.
I'm sorry, I thought I was unmuted earlier.
You were right up until the FRA request status.
The robot lady's asking me to unmute myself over and over. Am I on right now?
We can hear you, and I paused the time as well, so please go ahead, thank you.
Okay, and besides what I was saying about how they haven't responded to all my PRA requests, I'd like to say that you guys asked some great questions about the live facial recognition, and they definitely didn't answer them or explain how Vigilant Solutions was involved in that process, because there's no other reason why you would put that in there unless it was for Vigilant Solutions. And I'd like to say another huge problem is there's no multi-level, multi-person review of searches. There should be a committee at the police department that has to approve any match before people are sent out with guns to go apprehend people. Right now, it can just be one guy going, yeah, it looks like the algorithm was right. And that's just not acceptable. That's how mistakes get made. That change alone would solve a lot of the possible problems, but still having the system at all with their history of not being trustworthy, it's a recipe for disaster. And as the ACLU and others have suggested, a ban on facial recognition would be a great policy. And the city should also consider a surveillance transparency ordinance, so I don't have to file PRAs to uncover this stuff, and the police can tell us their plans before they implement them in the future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to the next speaker with the phone number ending in 84. If you'd like to please unmute yourself and again state your name before the 2 minutes start. Thank you. Again, 84.
Hi, yeah, my name is Caitlin Bellis. I'm an attorney and a Long Beach resident. And I want to start off by saying that I unequivocally support a complete ban on facial recognition. I don't think there's any way to use this technology while respecting the rights and privacy of the community, and especially given the racist impact that it has on our community members. I think that it absolutely has to be banned. I would also support a transparency ordinance. I do actually have 2 questions, and I have submitted PRAs before, and I will submit them in a PRA again, but I want to ask first, how is the special order enforced, and who is responsible for ensuring compliance? And then second, how the policy, once it is rolled out, how that will be enforced, and who will be responsible for compliance, especially with the Long Beach Values Act, given that we have not seen any kind of action taken in response to the ALPR breach that Jamilette was speaking about earlier, and that it is absolutely unacceptable that that happened, and LBPD must take steps to make sure that it does not happen again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. We'll move on to our next speaker. Someone with the extension or phone number ending in 73. If you'd like to go ahead, you have 2 minutes. And again, please state your name before you start. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Aleman. I am part of the Long Beach Immigration Rights Coalition. The LBPD used surveillance technologies and then shared that information with ICE as of April, especially given police abuse and ICE presence at the protests during the summer of 2020. Giving LBPD access to these tools could frighten community members' participation in public events, including protests, and may prevent them from exercising their rights. We cannot trust LBPD with this technology, and we cannot trust the city unless it protects us. This technology has been harmful to the communities of color, and that it invokes fear in individuals to step out of their house. They are not comfortable being traced every step, and it's an invasion of privacy that their information is being shared. The LBPD shared data with ICE as of April. How can we trust them to not abuse their power over and over again? As part of the ultimate goal of defunding the LBPD, we demand that the Long Beach City Council and Police Department funding for these invasive technologies that create a mass surveillance state and drain money from our city. The City Council must, 1, end the use of automatic license plate readers, ALPR, terminate the contract with SRA International, General Dynamics, and Vigilant Solutions. 2, end cell phone surveillance, terminate the Stingray contract with Harris Corporation and the cell phone hacking contract with Celebrite. 3, prohibit any government use of ALPR, cell phone surveillance, or facial recognition technology, whether in the form of a trial, contract, or purchase of third-party data. 4, remove the LBPD from participation in LACRA's, prohibit direct data sharing with federal immigration authorities, and prohibit indirect data sharing with federal and local authorities and private companies that collaborate with federal immigration authorities. 5.
All right, thank you so much for your comment. We're going to move on to the next speaker. The individual whose phone number ends in 76. Please go ahead next. And a reminder, you have 2 minutes, and please state your name when you start. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Mariana Zavala y soy residente de Long Beach y miembro de la Coalición de Derechos de Inmigrantes de Long Beach. Estoy aquí para abogar por la terminación de fondos para el uso de la tecnología invasiva de vigilancia. Como miembro de la comunidad, estoy relacionada con personas que sienten vulnerabilidad ante esta situación. La vigilancia tecnológica está yendo más...
Perdón, señora, perdón. Si puede hablar un poquito más lento porque estoy tratando de tener todo para comentar después. I'm sorry. I just asked her to slow down because I'm trying to keep track of everything to say afterwards. So if we can restart her 2 minutes, please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Van a empezar los 2 minutos de nuevo. Adelante.
Disculpe, quiero interrumpir y decir que 2 minutos no es suficiente. Tienen que ser 4, como está haciendo interpretación. So, por favor, consideren que ellos tienen que platicar por los 2 minutos en total.
Yes, they did mention that before, that Spanish speakers will have 4 minutes since they need to be interpreted. Is that correct? Yeah. Los que hablan español tienen 4 minutos, 2 para usted, 2 para la intérprete. Adelante, perdón. Sorry for the interruption.
Sí, está bien. Mi nombre es Mariana Zavala y soy residente de Long Beach y miembro de la Coalición de Derechos de Inmigrantes de Long Beach.
Ya.
Estoy aquí para abogar por la terminación de fondos para el uso de tecnología invasiva de vigilancia.
Puede hacer todo el comentario, solo más lento. Adelante.
Como
Voy a
miembro de la comunidad, estoy relacionada con personas que sienten vulnerabilidad ante esta situación. La vigilancia tecnológica está yendo más allá de nuestra seguridad. El hecho de que LBPD comparte información con agencias federales es aterrador para los miembros de nuestra comunidad. El uso de la tecnología de vigilancia se implementa con objetivo de enfocarse sobre todo en comunidades negras, inmigrantes y de color. Y como se ha visto recientemente este año, poniéndonos en el ojo de agencias como ICE. Asimismo, haciéndonos más vulnerables para ser detenidos simplemente por nuestra apariencia física, más allá de que si en verdad cometiéramos delitos. Definitivamente, el uso de estas tecnologías pone en peligro nuestra integridad y nuestra seguridad. Van muy de la mano con el racismo y los abusos de los que por mucho hemos sido objeto por parte de la policía. La tecnología de reconocimiento facial, los ALPR y los stingrays le dan al LBPD y a las agencias federales la terrible capacidad de rastrear a las personas de manera instantánea y asimismo de brincarse la protección básica de una orden judicial. Esto me atrevería a decir que es inconstitucional. Por eso y más, exigimos que el Consejo de la Ciudad de Long Beach termine con el financiamiento del LBPD para uso de tecnologías invasivas de vigilancia y que todo este dinero sea utilizado en mejoras de programas donde nuestra comunidad sea beneficiada, expandiendo el presupuesto del pueblo. Que cese la tecnología de vigilancia para que miembros de nuestra comunidad inmigrante permanezcan de manera segura cuando se trasladen desde casa al trabajo y viceversa, y así no sean presa fácil de la policía y a su vez de agentes federales. No queremos más separaciones familiares. Por mi parte es todo. Gracias por su tiempo y su atención.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mariana Zavala. I'm a Long Beach resident and a member of the Immigrants' Rights Coalition of Long Beach, and I want to advocate for ending funding for for this technology. As a member of the community, I'm related and know many people who feel vulnerable in the situation of facial recognition technology. This causes people to value this technology more than the safety of the community. And the Long Beach Police Department shares this information with federal agencies, which leads to terrorizing the immigrant community. They focus their efforts on immigrant communities of color and Black communities. And this year, more of our communities have been on the radar of ICE due to this type of technology. This leads to people being detained due to their physical appearance rather than due to crimes that may be committed. This use of technology puts our safety in danger. It goes hand in hand with racism and abuse at the hands of police and federal agencies. The facial recognition software, Stingray, that is used by Long Beach LBPD and federal agencies leads to people being instantly recognized and to lose the protection that's promised them under the law and is unconstitutional. I call on the Commission to remove authorization for this type of invasive technology and to instead use the money for programs that will improve the community. I want to have this technology to not be used so that our immigrant community will feel safe as they travel from home to work and back home, and that they will not be bothered by the police or by federal agencies, and that we cannot have this use or this division in our community anymore. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your comment and for the interpretation services as well. Let's move on to our next public speaker with the phone number ending in 31. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, please. And again, state your name, and you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Ese número que termina con 31 y tienen 2 minutos.
Soy yo. ¿Sí me escucha?
Sí.
Hola, mi nombre es Griselda y soy parte de la Coalición para Derechos de Inmigrantes de Long Beach. Estoy aquí para exigir que no usen lectores automáticos de placas que recientemente de este año han sido utilizados para mandar información con ICE. El reconocimiento facial es racista, no protege a nuestras comunidades, sino se usan para criminalización de nosotros. Les pido que dejen de dar fondo a estas tecnologías y al Departamento de Policía y de los fondos a los programas del presupuesto del pueblo. Ocupamos del presupuesto del pueblo, ocupamos más recursos, no más criminalización. Gracias.
clear, but I will do my best. Fue un poco difícil de escuchar, pero voy a hacer con lo que escuché. Hi, my name is Vicenta. I'm with the Immigrants' Rights Coalition, and I'm here to ask that you will stop using the license plate detectors because that information is sent to ICE. I also want to ask that you not use the facial recognition technology because it is not used to protect the community. I believe that we should not use these funds for these types of technology, but we should use them for community programs and for the community budget, to not spend it and give it the money to the police, but rather use it for the priorities and budget of the community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your comment and again for the interpretation services. We'll move on to our next public speaker. Karina, if you'd like to unmute yourself, please introduce yourself and then the 2 minutes will start. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Hi, folks. My name is Karina Rodriguez, and I want to bring up a couple of things to y'all's attention based off of the presentation that we were given. First off, the presentation started off by mentioning Obama, right, and his work. Well, I hope y'all know that his administration severely damaged immigrants, right, Black immigrants. During his time, detention centers were filled. Why? Partly because of the collaboration between local police and ICE, which is still happening today, okay? Second, the looting, right? The looting that happened during that month. Why did it happen, folks? Why? Black communities protesting, the brutality suffered, right, at the hands of police departments. And your answer to that is to heavily surveil them even more? Really? Really? You're definitely missing, you're missing it. You're not getting it. The fact that you're using that as the basis for why we need this facial recognition really shows that you're totally missing the point. But why would I expect anything more from a police department? Because your duty at the end of the day, your origin comes from protecting and serving, right? Protect and serve the property of rich white people, overseers. And that's why our communities are never going to trust the police. Facial recognition software has been used before. It's racist, it's prone to abuse, and yet local and federal law enforcement agencies like ICE, like LBPD wants to do, still use it. It's anti-Black, and how is it supposed to help the community at the end of the day? You can't reform a racist software, okay? You can't simply just stop using it because it harms and inflicts communities you're claiming to protect, which you're really not protecting, because at the end of the day, that's not your job. Your origin is to protect and serve property of the rich and white. Where is the closure for the families and individuals killed by police brutality?
Thank you so much for your comment. We're going to move on to our next speaker. Again, we have 2 minutes per comment. Let's move on to the individual with the number ending in 65. Please unmute yourself, state your name, and then go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Katzlakabe. I'm the Director of Research for the Center for Human Rights and Privacy. With respect to facial recognition, many of the complaints have focused on its accuracy. Studies have shown that it is less accurate for people of color and women, which makes sense given that much of the process for developing facial recognition algorithms involved a largely white male population. However, the technology will improve, and I expect that one day it will be just as accurate for women and police of color as it is for white men. And that's even more scary. The largest problem with facial recognition is its use to submit people to a virtual lineup at any time, regardless of whether they are charged with or suspected of committing a crime. With this tool, police can identify protesters exercising their First Amendment rights. But wait, you say, police can be trusted to use the technology in a responsible manner? So let me tell you a brief story. Last year, Long Beach police used automated license plate readers to identify and flag vehicles that were near occurrences of looting in Long Beach without any specific evidence that they were involved in any criminal activity. This resulted in a high-risk stop of an innocent driver in Hesperia, which resulted in the innocent driver being handcuffed and hundreds of dollars in fees. Long Beach police were trusted to use license plate readers in a responsible manner and failed to do so. Unfortunately, we did not learn about this incident because of internal controls and transparency exercised by the police department, and there's no indication that we will learn about such things in the future. The use of any surveillance technology by Long Beach police can only occur in accordance with a comprehensive ordinance regulating the use of these technologies and with effective outside oversight. Questions. How accurate is the facial recognition solution that Long Beach wants to use? Has it been independently tested by a group like NIST? Does its accuracy vary by a person's gender or color? By how much? What database of images will be used for comparison? Does that database include only those convicted of a crime? How will the success of the program be determined? And can the police avoid scrutiny by using another agency's resources? Thank you for your time, and I very much appreciate this whole process that the Tech Committee has undergone. I think it's great. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for your comment. We'll move on to our next speaker, the individual with the phone number ending in 00. Again, please state your first and last name, and the 2-minute clock will start. Thank you. Again, 00.
Por si acaso es el número que termina con 00.
Can you tell that person maybe in Spanish how to hit *3?
Yes. Tiene que poner asterisco 6 para quitarse de silencio. It starts 6 to get off of mute, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
6.
Estrella 6 para quitar el silencio, el que termina con el número con 00. Sorry. Yes.
Can you hear me now? Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, Tech and Innovation Commission. My name is Marlene Montañez, and I am the Associate Director at Long Beach Forward. Today, we join our community in urging this commission to take a stance to ban facial recognition. We know surveillance technology has drawn widespread criticism for many years, including from the House Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security. To quote Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee, there are many unknowns, but we can be certain of one thing. Most, if all, facial recognition systems are less accurate for people of color and women. For the most part, we can be confident that the darker your skin tone, the higher the error rate. Given these widespread concerns, it is alarming that federal agencies and local agencies are deploying these technologies. Safeguards and transparency and oversight are largely non-existent. How can we deploy these technologies with no safeguards for our community? We urge this commission to take a stand and take our communities into consideration, especially BIPOC communities.
Thank you for your public comment. We'll move on to our next speaker, the individual with the phone number ending in 10. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and you can begin public comment. And again, please state your first and last name, please.
Por si acaso es el número que termina en 10 y que diga su primer nombre y apellido.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Heidi García. Mi comentario es que no estoy de acuerdo en que se sigan incrementando fondos para expandir el uso de la tecnología de vigilancia para la policía de Long Beach. Esta tecnología solo implica alarma para nuestras comunidades negras, inmigrantes y de color, dejándonos así con temor e inseguros. En lugar de proporcionar más dinero para la policía de Long Beach, pueden incrementar esos fondos para el pueblo que da financiamiento a la vivienda, al acceso al idioma, representación legal gratuita para los inquilinos o programas para jóvenes, programas para personas mayores y más. Se ha sabido que la policía de Long Beach ha utilizado la tecnología de vigilancia y después la ha compartido con ICE. Por experiencia propia voy a decir que en noviembre, no voy a decir el año, fue arrestado por un accidente de tráfico un vecino mío y un par de meses después ICE llegó a su casa con una fotografía diferente a la que era de mi vecino, con la información de él. ¿Cómo me lo puedo explicar? No sé. Solo sé que no puedo confiar en la policía de Long Beach y no puedo confiar en la ciudad, al menos de que nos protejan. Como parte de la meta final, quiero exigir que el Consejo de la Ciudad de Long Beach termine con el financiamiento del Departamento de la Policía. Que dejen de usar los lectores automáticos de las placas, porque ya no podemos salir tranquilos a las calles y que un policía se acerque y no poder caminar seguro de que no están leyendo nuestras placas y que no compartirán esa tecnología, que no compartirán nuestra información con ICE de nuevo. De antemano les agradezco mucho que me hayan escuchado en mi comentario. Soy parte de la comunidad de Long Beach, del derecho de inmigrantes de Long Beach. Muchísimas gracias. Que pasen excelente tarde.
Okay. Hi, sorry, one second. Hi, my name is Aide Garcia, and my comment is about this technology. I would like the funding to not be going to them. It really alarms and affects our communities of color. I believe that rather than giving more money to the police for this technology, we should give the money instead to the community for things like affordable housing, language access, programs for the youth, programs for the elderly, and more. The Long Beach Police has used this type of surveillance technology and shares it with ICE. I have my own experience with this in November of a year that I'm not going to say. My neighbor was arrested after a traffic incident, and a little bit later, ICE showed up with a different picture and other information about my neighbor, and we don't know how they got it. But we can't trust the police or trust the city unless they protect us. To conclude, I would like this committee to end the funding to the police department so that they will not use this type of license plate identification. We can't trust the police to keep us safe and to not share our information with ICE. We feel that we can't walk safely through the city or drive in the city without that information being tracked. Thank you for listening to my comment. I'm a part of the Long Beach Immigrants' Rights Coalition, and thank you once again, and I hope you have a nice afternoon.
Great, thank you for your public comment and again for the interpretation services. Let's move on to our next speaker, the individual with a phone number ending in 53. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Again, state your full name and then the 2 minutes will start. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you. My name is Tracy Rosenberg. I just wanted to call to express support for the process and the findings and the recommendations of the subcommittee that has done this investigation. I'm sure that you know this, but I just wanted to sort of underline or bring to your attention that earlier this year, BuzzFeed magazine released, based on some leaked information, a list of California police departments that had been testing Clearview AI. And of course, Long Beach Police Department appeared on that list, using it somewhere between 101 and 500 times. I don't know if you're on the low end or the high end of that spectrum, but in any case, that's a fairly large amount of tests. And I guess the question or the concern that I want to bring up is, if there's all of this auditing in place, as we heard about over and over again, how did this happen? Because it seems to me that you're sort of addressing things via policy sort of after the horse has left the barn. And in general, when misuse has been proven with a technology and using Clearview 200, 300, 400, 5 times with no authorization and no recognizable policy in place, and your public information officer said, we do not keep records related to Clearview searches. So that means you don't know what happened, how it was used, and what it was used for. And when that kind of misuse is proven, what you do is you stop, because that's a hint that it's not being used in a safe and appropriate manner, if that's even possible with facial recognition. So you really are in a position now where you have to stop, and you have to go back to the beginning of the process, which is where you figure out if facial recognition even should be used, and if.
Thank you so much for your comment. Again, there's a 2-minute limit that we have, unfortunately. So let's move on to our next speaker who's queued up. They're phone number ends in 60. If you'd like to unmute yourself, please state your name, and then the 2 minutes will start. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent, thanks. My name is Lawrence Maminta. I'm a lifelong resident of Long Beach. Let me just out myself as somebody who completely unequivocally supports a full ban on FRT. And, you know, almost all of the callers, just about all of the callers have brought up excellent points, so I'm not going to beat any dead horses. I do want to respond to Assistant Chief Hebish's claim that the use of LACRIS is unbiased, though. If LACRIS is full of faces of people who've been arrested and or booked, I hope it's not news that LA County Sheriff's LAPD and Long Beach PD disproportionately arrest and book Black people especially, but especially people of color. So let me just point out that, you know, I don't know how use of LACRIS can be unbiased when the database is full of Black and brown faces. I had some other academic and scientific facts to bring up, but again, the callers have just been very much on point. Real quick shout out to Greg Buell's work at checklbpd.org, and I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comment. I know that we had a caller with a phone number ending in 33 at the beginning of public comment, so I want to give that individual a chance to speak now if they would like. And then maybe we can also say one more time for the callers in Spanish just how to raise their hand as well, just by clicking *3 on their phones.
Estamos esperando el comentario de la persona cuyo teléfono termine con 33 y si hay personas adicionales que quieran comentar, para levantar la mano va a marcar en el teléfono asterisco o estrella 3 y así van a saber que quieren comentar. Ahora es el que termina el número en 33.
Thank you so much for that. I do see we have 2 other individuals that would like to provide comment. The first has a name ending in US. If you'd like to go ahead, please introduce yourself and we'll start the 2 minutes. Thank you.
I believe that's anonymous.
I figured, I didn't want to assume anything.
Yadi Yangse, facial recognition technology, FRT, has been proven to be unreliable, discriminatory, and a threat to civil rights. The March 18, 2021 memo, aka current policy titled Special Order Facial Recognition Technology from Long Beach Police Department states, Long Beach Police Department may elect to integrate the use of facial recognition technology with its public safety video surveillance. FRT, when used in this manner proposed by LBPD, enables the government to automatically track residents' identities, whereabouts, associations, and even facial expressions. The use of the tech by government agencies like this creates unfettered citywide networks that place our communities under continuous surveillance. The powerful and automated nature of surveillance tech like facial recognition incentivizes the needless infringement of First and Fourth Amendment rights such as due process. A June 2021 report by the U.S. State Government Accountability Office titled Facial Recognition Technology recommends that law enforcement agencies should better assess privacy and other risks. Cities across the nation and tech companies have acknowledged the harms of FRT use by law enforcement. Facing a reckoning over racial equity, institutions like IBM, Microsoft, and Amazon announced moratoriums on FRT partnerships with law enforcement last year. As of 2021, jurisdictions in Minnesota, California, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Maine, Oregon, Vermont, Wisconsin, Louisiana have already passed bans on FRT. And personally, I have worked with FRT and witnessed its alarming bias and severe flaws firsthand. Please ban law enforcement use of facial recognition tech in Long Beach.
Thank you for your comment. I do not see any other hands raised at the moment.
Hi, sorry to interrupt, but there's actually 2 more speakers. They may not know how to raise their hand, but I do have their names.
Okay.
One of them is Lupita Uribe.
Okay, let's start with that comment, please. Thank you.
Lupita Uribe, si puedes quitarte de mudo con estrella 6, por favor.
Sí, buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Lupita Uribe y formo parte de la coalición para los derechos de inmigrantes de Long Beach. Y me dirijo a ustedes para decirles el miedo aterrador que siento al ver que cada día la tecnología invade nuestra privacidad y la de todos los que vivimos en Long Beach. No es justo, la policía está según para proteger y salvaguardar nuestra seguridad, pero en realidad es que utilizan tecnologías con compañías que dan información a ICE. No queremos la vigilancia facial ni ninguna en la cual nos veamos en peligro de ser perseguidos. Lo que estamos demandando es respeto, que den fondos para programas que más ayudarán, no los que nos criminalizan más como esas tecnologías invasivas. Muchas gracias por su atención. Espero haya sido de ayuda.
Good afternoon. My name is Lupita Uribe, and I'm part of the Long Beach Immigrants' Rights Coalition. I'm here to share the terrorizing fear that I feel knowing that every day technology invades the privacy of those of us who live in Long Beach. It is not fair. The police are here to protect us and to provide safety, but in reality, they are using technology with companies that share our information with ICE. I do not want any facial recognition technology or anything else that puts us in danger of being persecuted. We demand respect, funding for programs that help us rather than criminalizing us even more, such as this type of invasive technology. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this has been helpful.
Great, thank you for your comment. And then was there one more Spanish language speaker who wanted to provide comment as well?
Yes, the name is Berta, and Berta, si te puedes poner de estrella 3, por favor.
Estrella 6.
No, estrella 6, disculpe. Estrella 6, Berta. Ok, so no creo que ella pueda, pero también está otra persona, Luz María. Luz María, si nos escuchas, puedes poner estrella 3. Estrella 6, disculpe. Para poder escucharte es estrella 6.
So it looks like Bertha's unable to join, but we have another speaker, Luz Maria.
Okay, please go ahead then. Would you mind instructing him to please go ahead? Thank you.
Adelante, Luz María, si puede con la estrella 6 para poder hablar. O asterisco 6 en el teléfono.
It's possible their phone may also have a separate unmute or mute button. So if you could advise them to check that as well, that would be great.
Es posible que también haya otro botón en el teléfono para quitarse de silencio o de estar en mudo. Así que si puede revisar eso. Y también es la estrella 6 para que las podemos escuchar en esta reunión. Luz María o Berta.
Are we sure that they're on this this platform at this time?
Yes, they are. They are telling me that there's just no way it's saying that they can't go off mute. I'm not sure what's going on, but they are trying. So,
Do you have the last two? Sorry to interrupt, but do we have the last two digits of their phone number? We might be able to unmute them ourselves.
I believe it's 77.
I am not seeing anyone with 77.
Okay. What about 90?
I'm not seeing anybody with 90. They might be on the other platform.
Yeah, that's probably it. Okay. That
Do we want to give the public speaker the information to log into the correct meeting?
Yes. So I'll say it in English, and if we can translate that in Spanish. You need to hang up from the other meeting and call into this meeting, which is 213-306-3065. And then the meeting ID is 146-346-8576. And Anne, can you make sure that's, and it's being interpreted in the other platform as well.
Correct.
Anne, can you do that here? Just give space, time.
Yeah, well, if they're in here, then we're good, right?
Okay.
But we said that in the other room.
Okay. And just for the commission's awareness, the WebEx platform was not set up for language translation, and we got the request for language translation after the meeting agenda was already published. So in future, we'll look at using Zoom for these meetings. In addition, our team members who have the equipment that could do bridges were used at the redistricting commission, which was at the same, and the equipment that was used was at the redistricting commission, which is being held at the same time.
Oh, I just noticed that I have someone in the other room who has raised their hand. Do we want them to comment in the Spanish room and I can interpret directly here?
If you can do that, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Let me just tell them and then I will come back on. Actually, Megan, I might need your help to allow them to unmute themselves. I don't think I have that permission in the Spanish room, but I think that this could work.
Just want to give kudos to TI staff for really, coming up with a solution to ensure our Spanish-speaking community members can share their opinion. I know it's a lot of work, so thank you very much for all of your efforts. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Vincent.
And I actually do see that the caller with the extension or the phone number ending in 90 is in this meeting as well.
We just want to make sure, though, that our interpreter isn't listening to the other speaker, so we might want to wait.
Yeah, if we can just hold on 1 second. Thank you.
Sure.
Hello? Hello?
Un momento, por favor.
Thank you.
They're not unmuting on the other one, so if we want to go ahead with this user or this caller, and then we can try and get the one on the other line.
Okay,
yeah? Okay, go ahead, Julie. Okay, adelante.
¿Me oye?
Sí.
Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es Luz María Ortiz y soy miembro de la Coalición para Derechos de Inmigrantes de Long Beach.
Estoy aquí para manifestar que no estoy de acuerdo de el uso de la tecnología de vigilancia como el programa de reconocimiento facial, porque se usa como una herramienta de seguir criminalizando a gente de color. También pido o exijo que no usen lectores de placas automáticos. Esta tecnología da miedo porque sabemos que hasta recientemente este año el Departamento de Policía colaboró con ICE. Es una pérdida de dinero invertir en estas tecnologías. Mejor inviertan en programas de asistencia de renta, ayuda para las personas de la tercera edad, para prevención en la juventud. Y quiero que nuestra voz sea escuchada, y muchas gracias por su atención y por su tiempo, por darme mi tiempo. Gracias.
Hi, my name is Luz Maria Ortiz. I'm a part of the Long Beach Immigrants' Rights Coalition, and I'm here to share that I do not agree with the use of facial recognition technology. It is a tool that is used to criminalize people of color. I also would like to demand that the automatic license plate detection not be used. It engenders fear in the community because as of very recently, the police were collaborating and sharing that information with ICE. I would like instead to have the money be invested in programs such as rent assistance, programs to help the elderly, and programs to help youth. I really want our voice to be heard. Thank you so much for your attention and for giving me this time.
Great, thank you for your comment. And I do see that the caller with the number ending in 77 is also in the room, and they have their hand raised. So if you wouldn't mind instructing that person to go off mute and begin public comment, that would be great.
El número que termina con 77, si puede comentar.
Hola, buenas tardes. ¿Me escuchan?
Sí.
Sí, mi nombre es Berta y soy miembro de la Coalición de Derechos de Inmigrantes de Long Beach. Hoy en esta junta quiero pedir y exigir que el Departamento de Policía deje de intimidar a nuestra gente, usando cámaras para identificar según a los que ellos llaman inmigrantes, criminales. Eso es un abuso de privacidad a las personas de color e inmigrantes. Pido un alto a la compra y uso de tecnologías de rastreo y vigilancia, como el de reconocimiento facial y los lectores automáticos de placas. Y como madre de hogar y con estudiantes que apenas están empezando sus estudios, exijo que en vez de hacer estos gastos innecesarios de este tipo de tecnologías que solo causan temor entre nuestras comunidades, con este fondo apoyemos a las futuras generaciones en diferentes programas, tanto para la gente de la tercera edad, y también representación legal para los inquilinos y muchos otros programas de beneficios para la comunidad de Long Beach. Es tiempo que desembolsemos al Departamento de Policía, porque yo en lo personal no me he sentido protegida por ellos. Porque hubo un día en que yo necesité de su ayuda, supliqué que vinieran a ayudarme y ellos nunca llegaron. Muchas gracias.
Hi, my name is Berta, and I am part of the Long Beach Immigrants' Rights Coalition. And I'm in this meeting to help demand that the police department stop intimidating our people, to stop persecuting those who they call our criminals, but instead are criminalizing immigrants and people of color. I want them to stop using this type of monitoring, facial recognition, and automatic license plate recognition. As a mother of students who are just beginning their studies, I demand that instead of funding this unnecessary technology which causes fear in communities, to use this funding to support our future generations, and as well as the elderly, with different programs that will help them. Programs like Help for renters and programs that will benefit our Long Beach community. I would like to defund the police department because personally, I have not felt protected by them. One day I needed help and I begged for them to come and help me, and they did not come to help.
Great, thank you for your comment and again for the interpretation services. I do not see any other individuals queued up to comment. Give it a couple moments. Right. I think that concludes public comment for this item.
Okay, can we have a motion to receive and file?
This is Commissioner Brunson.
Oh, sorry.
Motion.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Motion.
I'll second that. DW.
Thank you for that. Chair Gwen Schaefer.
Aye.
Vice Chair D.W. Farrell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rob Karinke.
Aye.
Commissioner Lisa Mae Brunson.
Aye.
Commissioner Justin Hectus.
Aye.
Commissioner Parisa Vincent.
Aye.
Commissioner Andrea White Hughes.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. At this time, do we have any other public comment for any of the items?
Excuse me, didn't we have the opportunity to discuss amongst ourselves, or are we postponing that?
Yes, I'm going to bring that up. Okay, but it is 6:05, and I know many of us have family obligations and other things, so I'm sorry, Parisa, but I don't think we can continue the discussion this evening. So I think as a commission, we can make a decision as to whether we want to take this up. Obviously, we will take this up again in our August meeting, but the other option is to schedule a study session where we won't take any votes, but we will just have more in-depth deliberation over where to go next. So what do you guys?
I move we do a study session.
I agree.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I
Okay,
agree.
so thanks, guys. Is this something that you want to do prior to the third week in August, before our next meeting?
If
Definitely
we could do
before
it
it's
in lieu of.
agendized again.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Rob. I was talking.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yes.
Okay, so Leah, is that okay if we schedule something like in the next 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah, we can work with you all offline to find a time that can be accommodated, and as long as we give the appropriate public notice, we can schedule a special study session.
Okay.
And for that session, sorry, Gwen, should we assume it also would be online on WebEx, or would we have a change of
Well, that's a
forum?
good question, because we can meet again in person, right?
Yeah, so we were planning on meeting in person in August. With that said, the case rates and positivity rates have gone up a lot. So at this point, we're kind of being encouraged to kind of stay virtual, but at the same time, if the commission really wants to be in person and also to avoid the technology limitations, everyone would have to be masked at all times, and physical distancing. We could try to plan an in-person event in Chambers.
I don't really want to do it in person, speaking for myself.
Okay, I think virtual is more practical at this point. And then you don't have to worry about scheduling the room and all that stuff as well. Just a couple of things that I would say prior to the study session. If each of us, especially those commissioners who were not on the subcommittee, could do some independent research and maybe fill in some of the gaps that are that you identify in the report that our subcommittee members put together. And there's also a lot of links in that report. And if you guys are like me, you did not have time to read every citation. So it would be great if we could come to the study session with a broader knowledge base.
And Gwen,
Yeah.
kind of going off of that point, I would like the opportunity to send some additional documents. For example, I don't believe that you all have seen the facial recognition technology special order. So I want to make sure that you all have access to that if you don't already have access to it. Also, in terms of public comment, written public comment, there was a written public comment from Greg Buell of Czech LBPD, and only the cover letter for some reason is included. So I would ask staff to please ensure that the full letter, not just the cover letter, is uploaded.
I think it was the ACLU letter that he attached.
No, I know this because I attended the Public Safety Committee meeting on the 23rd of July, and his full letter was attached, what his goal was, and the cover letter was explaining the relevance of the letter that he submitted at that 723 meeting.
Okay. We'll address that. We'll address that.
Okay.
For the study session, do you think, Leah, that Zoom or another platform might accommodate other languages better?
As part of our rescheduling, we'll make sure to have the right staff and equipment and platform and language translation in place.
Okay, thank you. I mean, this kind of worked, but it was not accessible as it needed to be. And I think we all would recognize that.
Correct.
Yes, and I think just like Parisa said that she's going to provide additional documentation, I think we should all feel free to do the same. You know, if we're aware of research or
so any
best practices in other cities, like let's get as much information together to review ahead of time as possible.
Just send it through us and we'll distribute it to avoid any Brown Act violations.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you to Andrea and Parisa and Estefania, if you're still on. I think you are, for the time and effort that you put into putting together the report and for kickstarting this really important discussion.
And I want to add thank you to members of the public that came out to speak. Your voices were heard, and it's very important, even though technology somewhat helps in bringing people to a stage where they can speak. It also is not always easy. So thank you for everyone who had patience and for showing up and speaking.
And I just want to echo what Vice Chair Farrell just said. Thank you to members of the public who showed up today. We are better for having heard your voice, and we will continue to listen and act. Thank you.
So we can adjourn the meeting of today at 6:11 p.m.